I'm Sam from Oxygen Tech, and today we're going to build your first Flutter app with an online tool called DartPad.
What is Flutter and what is Dart? Flutter is a UI toolkit or a user interface toolkit. It uses widgets to create displays, beautiful displays that can be dynamic and functional. Here in the middle of the screen, we see an example of an application, and I'm just going to show you what widgets are. So everything you see on here is essentially a widget. This app bar at the top is a widget. The icons on it are a widget. The text is a widget. This image of a car is a widget. The gradient in the background here going from dark to light is a widget. Even the spacing between these widgets are widgets. And Flutter is powered by Dart. Dart is a programming language which is portable, fast, and powerful. So it gives Flutter functionality. It enables it to do things. Whilst Flutter presents a beautiful interface, Dart gives it the ability to function. So as a scenario, imagine you want to develop a countdown timer because you're opening up a restaurant, a Mario Kart themed restaurant. You want a timer to count down when the opening night will be. And you want access to this countdown timer anywhere you go, whether it be on your phone, on your tablet, on your laptop, your desktop, your smartwatch, even the interface in your car. You can build this using Flutter and Dart. Today I'm going to show you an online tool. When you navigate to dartpad.dev, this is what you'll likely see. This is the generic look, and here we have a basic program that's already filled in. So we're going to delete that, and what we're going to do is just have a chat about the things you can build with Flutter first of all. So I'm going to write mobile apps. So with Flutter Mobile, you can build iOS and Android apps. So if you have an iPhone, you're using the iOS operating system. If you have almost any other smartphone, you're probably using Android. So Flutter can build apps for both systems using the same code base. They can also build for web. So most browsers, I would say, are supported by Flutter. I have yet to come across one that is not supported by Flutter. So for example, Chrome, Edge, Safari, Opera, Brave, DuckDuckGo, Firefox. They're all supported by Flutter. You can build Flutter web apps on them using the same code base that you use to build the mobile apps. And you can also build desktop apps. So whether that be Mac, Windows, Linux, doesn't matter. You can build with any of them. Also, embedded devices. So for example, Android Auto in your car, a Raspberry Pi, which is a small computer, essentially just a chip of a computer, and you can use it, for example, for a thermostat interface or a basic display, something like that. So there are a vast array of different things you can build with Flutter from the same single code base. It's very fun to work with. So as an example, I just want to show you my web app that I've built with Flutter. So just a couple of things to note about building web apps with Flutter. The initial load time of the web app can be slow when you first load it on your computer, and search engine optimization is not great. So if someone's searching for your company in a search engine and you're hoping they stumble across your website, Flutter's not going to be the best for that because it's not based off HTML. So this is a basic app I've built with Flutter, just about Oxygen Tech. So here we have an image widget, app bar at the top with certain buttons, which are all widgets, of course. And as you can see, it's a nice dynamic display. So you can see when I change the width of the screen, the app changes as well to fit the new width. So watch the app bar up the top here. As I make it narrower, closer to the size of a mobile, it changes. So now you have an app drawer at the side where you can navigate through your menu from there rather than the top. So an example of something else I've built with Flutter, Digby. It's a basic game. It's a fun little glitchy game. If you'd like to play it, go to digbygame.com.au. So essentially all you do is move around this little fella named Digby. and try not to hit any of the barriers coming your way. So this is just a simple app that can be built using Flutter. I've used this on desktop, on my tablet, on my mobile phone, had absolutely no issues going between them. All right, let's close these, give us a bit more processing power back. So what I'd like to do today first is to build a Dart app. So a basic Dart app that's going to print to the console. So I'm going to get rid of all that, have an empty code. So if you open dartpad.dev, you might have the basic template code, the Dart snippet. That's fine. If you don't have that, go new Dart snippet. That'll give you this code. Delete it, and we're just going to write our own. So we write void main parentheses and then curly brackets at the end. So this is the main function. In most programming languages, the first thing the computer will look for when executing the code is the main function. So this is the function where it starts, where the first thing happens. This void keyword here is the return type of the function. So some functions return a value. So whether that could be a number or a piece of text. This void means it doesn't return anything. So the main function does not return anything. So what we're going to do in here is use a print function. Open the parentheses and we're going to write hello there. So, and we put a semicolon at the end to execute this. So when learning a programming language, you'll often see in tutorials, hello world is the first app they make. This is a slight little twist because I like to be different. So I've just written hello there. And when we run the app, we will see over this side of the screen in the console, we should be printed a message. Hello there. So that works well. So you can write whatever you want in here. So something I'd like to show you. Let's call this Sam's first Dart app. So you'll see an issue here. So we've got a lot of red underline, which means we've got some errors. The problem is the quotation marks. So this apostrophe here is being identified as a quotation mark and closing off the string of text. We need to use apostrophes when building apps sometimes. It's just something that's unavoidable, so we can't just delete that and not worry about it. So what you can do is put a backslash in front of it, and that tells the computer, okay, this is part of the text, it's part of the string. I'm not going to worry about that, and we're going to close the string over here. So we run that, and we shouldn't have any issues at all. And we'll just wait for this to pop up. There we go, Sam's first Dart app. So another way around this is to use double quotes. So in Dart, it doesn't matter if you use single or double quotes. You can do either way. I just wanted to demonstrate this so you're aware. So we run that, and we shouldn't have any issues. Beautiful. So now that we've built a very basic Dart app, we're going to use Flutter. So under new over here, you'll see an option for Flutter snippet. You'll be able to see that a bit better if you don't have a dark mode browser. Be a bit better contrast. So this Flutter snippet is of course a hello world app. So we're going to get rid of that. We're going to delete it and we're going to write our own. So just something to mention about DartPad. This is great for building apps and practicing with them and learning. But you can't publish apps from here. So to do that, you'd have to download an integrated development environment or IDE, such as VS Code or Android Studio. In future videos, I will be using VS Code, and I would recommend downloading that if you're going to install Flutter on your device. So first here, we're going to write an import statement. So we're going to import a package, which is flutter/material.dart. So Material is a design theme that's used by Android and has been adopted by Flutter as a default as well. So if you're using widgets, you should usually import material.dart. So what we're going to do here is create, again, our main function. As a Flutter app, we also need a main function so the computer knows where to start. And we're going to run app. And we haven't named our app yet, but we'll do that now. So class. Let's call it first, actually no, let's call it hello world. Extends stateless widget. So don't worry about what most of these words mean. So all we want to focus on here is the title of our app. The rest of the stuff in the code I'll talk about in future videos, but I don't want you to worry about that now. Const hello world. So const is just to identify that this is a constant value, it's not going to change. And I'll just quickly mention a stateless widget because it's important, you're going to be seeing a lot of them. Stateless widget is immutable, which means it doesn't change. Once built, it stays the same. In Flutter, there are also stateful widgets, which do change. They mutate, they are mutable. So we're going to work with a little bit of both of them today. So the stateless widget, we've built our constructor, which is this line here. And don't worry about what that is yet. In future videos, I will go over it. So now we've got the build method. So when I say function up here, this is a function. And now I'm saying method. So a method is another word for a function that is declared inside a class. Again, don't stress too much about what this means. So this takes a build context to get the context of the app. And we're going to return a material app. All right, cool. So up here, we haven't passed in our app yet, so we're going to say constant hello world and put our parentheses in there as well, don't forget that. So now if I run this, it will work, but I just want to add another widget just to show you that it's working, because if I run this, it's just going to be a blank material app screen, you won't see anything. So within a material app, you have a home value. So all we're going to do is put a text widget. So in our text widget, we will write with the backslash before the apostrophe s, sims first. Actually, no, let's say, welcome to the show. You are the first one here. And we're using an apostrophe again. So we're going to backslash that. And don't forget the quotation mark at the end. Now you'll notice, oops, it's just one there. You'll notice that I'm putting commas after a lot of parts of test. That's just for formatting reasons. So when I press this format button up here, I can see through the indentation what widgets are within other widgets. So let's run this and see what we have. Okay, so we have this horrendous red and yellow scheme. Welcome to the show, you're the first one here. Now, a couple of things I don't like about this. I don't like the debug banner. So in Flutter by default, this is enabled when you're running an app in debug mode. It'll go away when you publish an app, but we can remove this. And the text over here, it doesn't look good. So what can we do to get around that? Within a material app, usually we have a scaffold. So a scaffold is something that holds other widgets. It enables us to build an actual app that looks decent. So I'm going to cut this. Scaffold takes a body value, which will be this bit of text. I'm going to format that. Okay, and to get rid of the debug banner, under material app, now I've just copied this value, debug show checked mode banner. In IDEs or integrated development environments, usually you can start typing a word and it will autofill. I've never taken the time to memorize this one, as it's usually already complete. So I'm just setting that to false so the banner goes away. So now we should have a nicer looking app. Okay, cool. All right, so we've got a white page with our black text at the top. So it's still, I don't like the positioning of the text, so I'm going to wrap this in a center widget. So center helps align the widget within it and is a widget itself. So it takes a child, which in our case will be a text widget. Let's format that. Right, so that's going to be centered. And while we're loading, I'll just say the other thing I don't love about that is the white background. I'm a bit of a dark theme guy. So up here, I'm going to say theme data.dark. So again, don't worry about what all these things mean. We'll learn it in the future. So now we have a nice bit of centered text, and I've put in the dark theme. Let's just run that. All right, now we're talking. Dark theme, I like it. Just gonna move my head out of the way. Don't need to be seeing that. All right, so what are we gonna do now? We're gonna add an app bar up the top. So at the moment, we've just got a scaffold with a body value. So that's taking up the whole screen. So within the scaffold, you can also have an app bar. So the scaffold for all your Flutter apps, you're going to be using it. App bar. So within the app bar, you can specify a title. Oops, should be within the app bar, not around it. Title, and that will take a text widget. Again, I'm putting commas in just for formatting reasons. The title. Now I might say Sam's first Flutter app. And comma. And I have forgotten quotation mark there. Alright, reformat that. Errors should go away, yes, and we will run. Okay, I've got an app bar at the top. I've got a text widget in the middle. Now, I just want to show you where the app bar separates from the body of the scaffold. So I'm going to give it a background color. Background color, colors dot. Let's say blue-gray. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, I'd like it to be a little bit darker than that. So when you're working with colors, you can often give them a weight. This will make it a lot darker. Let's run that. So the weight of colors, it can, the default is 500. It can go as low as 50 and then to 100 and then up by 100 increments up until 900. So 900 will be the darkest version of blue-gray. Comes out of the box. You can also use hexadecimal colors in Flutter, so you're not limited to the colors in material design. That looks a bit nicer. I like that. I'm happy with that for my first app. So now what we're going to do is have a look at the samples up here, and we're going to go to the counter app. So this is traditionally the default app that's loaded when you build a new project in an IDE, integrated development environment, such as VS Code. So this was developed by the Dart project authors in 2019. So we're just gonna, I'll run that and then I'll talk you through the code. So first we have, again, we've imported material. So this is the void main function. Now this looks a bit different to what we've used. So void main run app const my app is exactly the same as what's above it. So if I were to comment that out, this would work just fine once the errors decide to go away. Just taking their time. So all this is a shortened version. If you only have one line of code to put in your function, you can use a fat arrow and just not have the curly brackets at all, and that'll still work just fine. So I'll bring that one back. So what we have here is a stateless widget. Again, stateless widgets do not change their state once they're built. That's the way they are, they're constant that way. Then we have a constructor that builds the widget. Then we have the build method, which returns a material app with a title of Flutter demo. So I think we're going to change that. Let's get this up and running. Okay, so this is the counter app. So you have the app bar at the top of the title, and you have pushed the button this many times, which is 0. This is obviously the button down here. The tool tip, which comes up, says increment. Just gives you a little hint of what the button does. So if we press it, it increments by 1. Again, again, again. How many times we press it is how many times it increments. So that's fine, but let's think of a scenario. With our Mario Kart themed restaurant, we'd like to monitor how many patrons are in the restaurant at any given time, so we know how many controllers we need. So in order to do that, we can't just have an increment button. We need to be able to increment and decrement. And also, in a situation where a sinkhole develops underneath a restaurant and down falls all our patrons. What are we going to do? We need to be able to reset to 0 much quicker than decrementing 100 people down to 0. That would take all day. So we're going to put in a reset button as well. So let's call this app patron counter. Just going to copy that because we're going to use it again. So here you'll see the debug show checked mode banner is already set to false. Not going to worry about that. Let's change the theme to dark mode again because I like it. And in our title we are going to put patron counter. So now this is a stateless widget right here. That's the whole thing. And then below it we have a stateful widget. So the stateless widget returns on its home page the stateful widget right here. So when it creates this home page, it gives it the title, which is patron counter. So here, when you're creating the blueprint or the template for the stateful widget, if you can see, it takes a title in its constructor. It says required title. You need to give it that title, and that's what we've done up here by putting in patron counter. And every stateful widget is accompanied by a state class. So that's what that is. Here we have the value of the counter. So when you first build the app, that'll be set to 0. So if I refresh the page now, this 4 would turn into a 0. So that's the default. So here we have a method. So a method, again, is a function that is declared inside a class. So for this method, what is happening is it's saying increment counter. So I should just note the underscore in front of these names. That just means it's private to that class, which means it can only be accessed by this class. If another class tries to access this value, for example, of counter, it won't be able to. So increment counter will set the state to increase the counter by 1. So this plus plus is equivalent to counter plus 1. So it's just a shorthand version of the same thing. So we're just going to keep that. Now we want to decrement and we want to be able to reset as well. So we're going to copy that. It'll only be a minor change. We're going to paste it twice. And we are going to decrement counter, which again we have a shorthand, which we can go minus minus and it will decrement by 1. And here we want to reset the counter and reset it to 0 in the event of a sinkhole. So counter equals 0. Okay, so now we have the build method of the state class, which returns a scaffold, which allows us to put widgets on top of it. In the app bar, we have the title, which we're happy with. In the body, we have a center widget, which wraps around a column. So it puts it in the center of the page. And the column has a value called main axis alignment. So imagine the column takes up the whole height of the page. This says main axis alignment dot center. So it positions it in the center of that column. So both the elements are right together in the center. And children are the values that the column takes. So this is a list of 2 values. So the first one is a constant value, which means it won't change. You have pushed the button this many times. So we're going to change that to number of patrons. And then this second widget is the value of the counter at any given time. And it's been given a bit of a style, headline medium size, which that's why it looks a little bit bigger and perhaps a little bit bold. And down the bottom, we have a floating action button, which when pressed, will increment the counter. Our tooltip, the little hint that pops up when you hover over, says increment. And the child is an icon, which is icons.add. That's the plus symbol. So here we want to add a couple of buttons, which means we're going to have to put a column here. I want them laid out vertically in a column. So the column takes a list of children. So for a list, we want square brackets. That's what indicates a list in Flutter. So up the top, we're going to have our increment button. Then we're going to have the reset button and the decrement button. So let's change this tooltip to reset. We want to change the method being triggered to reset counter, and the icon refresh I think would be a good one. It's kind of the refresh symbol you'd have in the browser. But to me, that's kind of like a restart or a reset, I suppose. It's the best I could think of. And then decrement counter below that. Decrement counter. And for its icon, we're going to have remove, which is essentially the minus symbol. If you're interested in the icons, just Google search material icons, and there's a whole bunch of icons you can use when you've got the material package imported up here, and you can use them in Flutter. So let's format that. Let's run the app. It should be in dark mode. The text should have changed, and we should have 3 buttons along the side. Let's see how they're oriented. Okay, so we have patron counter in the app bar at the top, which is good. Number of patrons is 0. That's good, but I don't like the placement of these buttons. Let's just see if they work for starters. 1, 2. Ooh, we can now decrement to negative numbers, which is not going to happen ever in person, so we're going to change that. Now let's see if the reset button works. Yep, that's good. So a couple of things I want to change. I don't want to be able to decrement when we're at 0. I want the buttons to be down the bottom of the screen where my thumb would lie when I'm using my phone, and I want to add a little bit of spacing in between the buttons as well. So let's start with the decrement function. If our counter value is greater than 0, then I want to decrement. If not, I want nothing to happen. So I'm just going to drag that in there. Format that. So that should mean once the value gets to 0, it should just stop decrementing. It'll check this. It'll say, is the counter greater than 0? No, it's not, because it's 0. And then it should skip this little block and go here where nothing happens. Okay, so now this column, main axis alignment, main axis alignment dot end. So by default, main axis alignment is set to start. That's why we're seeing this at the top of the screen. That's the start of the column, the top. So if we set it to end, it should move down the bottom. And let's add a bit of spacing in between. So we can use a sized box for this. So a sized box is essentially a blank widget that just can create space. It's a great way to space out your widgets. Height, let's say 8 pixels. Now I'm going to be using the exact same widget here, so I'm going to create a constant variable that I can use. So let's say gap height 8 pixels equals. So it's good not to try not to duplicate your code too much. So if I've stored this value in a variable, which a variable is a packet of information essentially, a package we could call it. So we can use that multiple times by just using the name. So let's put in a couple of gaps there. All right, so that should fix all our issues. Okay, our buttons look much better. On a mobile device, I should note they would be a little bit smaller. So I think it'd be a better aesthetic that way. Because this is a web app, it's designed to be a little bit wider. But that's all adjustable. You can change the size of things. So let's try increment, decrement. Can't decrement below 0, which is good. And now if we increment to 11 and we want to reset back to 0, perfect. Now I can keep track of how many patrons are in my Mario Kart themed restaurant, which is wonderful. Okay, so today we've had a bit of a look at what you can do with Flutter, some of the basics. In future videos, I'd like to get a little bit more in depth on how to use Flutter and Dart, how they work, how software works, and hopefully we can learn together how to build Flutter apps. Just as a side note, if you'd like to install Flutter on your device, so in DartPad, it's great for practice, it's wonderful, but you're not going to be able to actually publish apps. And you'll always come across issues when you're trying to install Flutter apps as well. It's just something to be aware of. But there's very clear instructions here. So I've pressed install SDK, which is software development kit, which is what Flutter is. And depending on what device and what operating system you're using, you press the corresponding button. So for example, I'm on a Mac, so I press the Mac and ask to choose your first type of app. It's recommended to choose iOS, so I'm going to go with that. Doesn't matter because I'll still be able to build the other apps based off this setup. I can set up other things later. So all you do is follow the instructions on here. So this one, you can use VS Code. So this is the integrated development environment that I use for Flutter. So you can install it using VS Code, which I think would be simpler than trying to install it yourself. And then you can get up and running. So again, my hope is to develop a number of videos just going through the basics of Flutter and Dart. It's to help myself learn as well as hopefully teaching others. I hope someone else can gain something from it. I know I will. It helps me to learn to explain concepts like this. So I want to thank you for watching and tagging along, and I hope you've enjoyed it, and I will see you next time.